Living with a partner can be amazing when you get it right. But how do you actually know when you're ready? And once you move in, how do you stay romantic partners instead of just two people splitting rent and chores? That is what we're getting into today. Welcome back to Dating Intentionally. I'm Talia. I'm sharing no nonsense advice for navigating dating and relationships with confidence and ease. Whether you've been dating for a while or you're just starting out, I believe dating can be fun. And you know what else is fun? Living with a partner when you get it right. I haven't done an episode on living with someone since 2023 when Johnny, my husband, and I first moved in together. And it's going to be 3 years of living together this summer. So I have a lot more to say on this as this is the second time that I've lived with someone for this long. In case you're new, here's a really quick recap of our timeline. We moved in exactly 1 year after we met. And not only did we move in together, we also moved to a different state. We moved from Seattle, Washington to the South Bay in California. So, new living situation and state. And then we got engaged 6 months after moving in and married 9 months after that. So, when we were married, we had been together for 2 years and change, and we had lived together for just over a year. So now it's been almost 3 years. And I'll say up front, it's going great. Like, truly, this timeline has been great for us so far, and it's been easy. It's not like last time where I felt like I was dragging someone along. So, in this episode, I'm going to get into how to know when to move in and discussions around that, like how to know when you're ready. And then I'm going to answer a bunch of your questions from Instagram about living with a partner, everything from managing finances to navigating alone time to keeping the romance alive. And if you want to hear questions and topics to get into before moving in, that is what my first episode on this topic covers, and it's linked below. There's a bunch of questions that are featured in there that you should talk about before living with someone. I'm not going to get into that in this episode, so it'll be there in the show notes. Also, if you have any thoughts or any questions while listening to this, please drop a comment if you're listening on Spotify or watching on YouTube. I love hearing from you. You can also slide into my DMs on Instagram at dating.intentionally. I truly, truly love hearing from you. So thank you for all your messages. Getting into it, how do you know when to move in with someone? Like, you're dating for a while, things are going well. How do you know it's time to take that step? And here's the thing, you get to decide for yourself. Like, there is no perfect set like date for 16 months and then you're good. And I have said this many times on this show, but it's so important that I'm going to say it again. You move in together when you know what it means for the big picture of your relationship. So before you think about the when, you need to nail down the why. Talk about your overall goals for the relationship. Do you want kids? Do you want marriage? Do you have kids already? What container are you putting around the relationship, and are you aligned? And also, what is the timeline? Are you aligned on the timeline for that? If you're aligned on the goals that you want, right, whatever it is, that makes it a lot easier to think about the logistics. I don't want you thinking about logistics before you're aligned on your why, because people truly do this backwards most of the time and it ends up blowing up in their faces, me included. Like, they figure out the logistics first and then the meaning later. So that's what we call sliding instead of deciding. And I'm not sure exactly who said that first. It's not something I made up, but that is what we call that. If you're sliding into moving in together, that means that you're just like, well, my lease is up, your lease is up, so let's just do it. Deciding is proactively being like, this makes sense for our relationship, here's why. Moving in together is so much more than sharing rent and chores and bills and making your life more convenient so you can see each other more. You're building a life together, so you've got to be intentional about it. Just to paint you a picture, my ex and I moved in together after we were long distance for a year, and when we closed the distance, when we were moving back to New York City, we decided to move in together. And we could have decided not to, but I do remember telling my ex, had been dating for 3 years at the time, I said, if we don't move in, I don't know if I would want to continue the relationship. I wanted to move it forward. And of course, I was 27 at the time, and I didn't really think moving forward towards what? Like, and are you sure you want to do that with him? We didn't have any conversation around our timeline or what we wanted in the near future in terms of getting married or anything like that. And that was a huge mistake. I could have saved myself so much stress and struggle if we had just had that check in of like, wait, what do we actually want and what are we doing here? And this is quick but important. Don't move in to fix something, right? If you are struggling as a couple and you think living together will bring you closer or fix something, it won't. If you're doing it mostly because rent is expensive and you'll save money, that is just not enough of a reason. I want you to really think about this. You move in with someone when it makes sense for the big picture of your relationship and when you're ready to do it. So you might be wondering, what does ready actually look and feel like? Maybe you are aligned on the timeline and you are aligned on what you want, like you want to have kids, get married, whatever it is. Does it mean you're ready? Cuz like, when I was dating Johnny, we were on the same page about a lot of things, but that didn't mean that we were ready. So let's start with some of the emotional signs that you are ready to cohabitate. The first one is that you're excited. You're not just relieved, right? This isn't about escaping your current living situation or making the logistics easier. You genuinely want to share a home with this person. Like they feel like home to you and you want to be at home with them, and that home is yours together. That's sweet. Two, you can picture the hard stuff, not just the fun, cozy couple stuff. You're not just imagining, the movie nights and dancing around the kitchen together, or whatever romantic fantasy is in your brain. You've also thought about what happens when you're both stressed, when there's nothing in the fridge, neither of you wants to go to the grocery store, or like you don't want to talk about dinner for like the 500th time. Like that is stuff you got to think about too. What is it like when someone is having a bad week? Another sign is that you're not afraid to have uncomfortable conversations with them. If the idea of asking about timelines or expectations feels terrifying, that's a sign you might not be ready. Realize that living together means having adult conversations around money, lifestyle, health, chores, sex, all of it together. And if you can have those conversations rationally and respectfully, and it doesn't feel terrifying, then that's a great sign that you're ready. And finally, another emotional sign is that you feel like a team. You're not convincing them or dragging them along. Moving in should feel mutual, that you're both excited and ready to do it. Here are some signs on the practical side that you're ready to move in with someone. You've talked about the what ifs, right? What if you break up? What if it doesn't work? What if one of you gets a job in another city? What if one of you has to go back home to deal with a parent or someone in need? What if you disagree on the timeline for engagement or marriage? Talk about those what ifs. Another one is that you've seen how they actually live, right? Like you've not just visited, but you stayed long enough to see the mess and the stress and the boring days too. Another practical sign is that you've been through at least 4 seasons together, right? A whole year. And I know that there are exceptions to this, like some people move in more quickly than a whole year, but I think the best guideline, like my best advice is if you were my best friend, I would tell you to wait a year. I think it's really important to see how they react to stress, how they take care of themselves and their space, and how they treat you on a bad day and on their best days. And within one whole year, you're probably going to see each other go through tough times, good times, boring times, just all the things. I think a year can give you a really good picture of what they're like and what you're like and how you are together. Another practical sign is that you've shown up for each other and relied on each other. How does your partner respond when you ask for help? And how do you respond when they ask for help? Do they ever even let you help them? And this matters because when you cohabitate, you need to have that team mindset. Also, another sign is that you've had success with planning together. Traveling is a great way to see how you work as a team, but I also want you to think about trying travel on hard mode, right? Try camping or like a multi-location trip or like a road trip, an RV trip, just something that's more challenging than going to one place and staying in one hotel or like resort and then going home. Let things go wrong. Share the planning. It doesn't have to be expensive. It could even be with like go stay with your relatives or something. Just think of what can you get into that would be challenging for you to figure out. I'm thinking like, oh yeah, just go to an escape room. But we need something more more real life than that. Also, the final sign I want to share is that you've talked about your timeline and what moving in means for your relationship. This is again, moving in is not just a romantic choice, it is truly a practical choice. And you have to talk about how it's going to work. Also, like, especially if you have kids, pets, parents, talk about all of these practical things. And I have more of that in the show notes in that episode I mentioned earlier, the conversations you should have before moving in together. Here are some red flags that you're definitely not ready. You're hoping that living together will fix something in your relationship. You're doing it because it feels like the next step or that rent is expensive. You haven't talked about what moving in means for your future together. You're afraid to ask them about the timeline, and you struggle to bring up serious topics with them, or they resist talking about serious topics. When Johnny and I had the move in conversation, like around 6, 7 months together, he told me it was important for him to live together before we got engaged because he had never lived with a partner before. And I was on the fence about that, having had the experience of living with someone before marriage, but I did agree. And I said, that's fine, as long as we're on the same page that we would figure out if we wanted to get married or not within 1 year of living together. And if a year came up on our lease and we still didn't know if we wanted to get married, I would have left and moved back to Seattle or New York. And he agreed because this is also his time too. He wasn't trying to waste time. He wanted to get married. He wanted to do that. And he knew, obviously, with women, it's like, if I want kids, time is of the essence. So we agreed. He thought that was reasonable, and he proposed to me 6 months after we moved in. If having a conversation like that with the person you're dating sounds terrifying, you need to consider whether if that's the kind of dynamic you want long term. I want you to be in a relationship where you feel comfortable bringing up the uncomfortable stuff. Don't move in with someone if you can't have these conversations because you will have so many more uncomfortable ones after you do live together. So to recap, you know it's time to move in together when you, one, have gone through 4 seasons together and you've seen and supported each other through stress and you've also celebrated the good times. 2, you've actually navigated conflict together, logistical and emotional. 3, you are fully aligned on what moving in means for your relationship and why you're making that move. And 4, you can agree on some form of your timeline for your future and move in when it makes sense, other than it's just convenient for your relationship. I have some questions from Instagram. By the way, thank you so much for listening and sending me all your messages again. I just really, really love hearing from you because it's like I'm not speaking into the void. You're here. So whatever you're doing right now listening to this, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. All right, getting into these questions. The first one is, how do you handle differences in habits? So when I first moved in with Johnny, I asked my good friends who at the time were engaged and had lived together for a few years, this question, and I think their advice was amazing. They said that the more you can explain your thought process and your why around your habits to your partner, the more they can understand, and the more they can understand how your brain works, the better, right? So if you have differences in habits, like maybe you hate clutter and your partner needs to be able to see everything on top of this counter and the shelves, you might be able to have a little more grace with them because you know how their brain works and that they want to see everything or else, it's hard for them. And they might be able to have a little bit more grace with you because you need less clutter to feel calm. When you do this and you explain to each other why you do certain things the way you do them, it also helps you not take things personally. Like, they're not leaving things on the countertops because they don't love you. They're doing it because that's how their brain works and then they want to be able to see things out on the countertops. That is super, super important when you're living with someone. Look, and for some differences in habits, you just deal. Like, I go to bed really early sometimes. Johnny stays up, and I don't love that. I'd rather go to bed at the same time, but it's fine. Or like, okay, Johnny has another habit that drives me nuts. When we're about to sit down for a meal, and usually I'm the one cooking, I'm ready to eat right away. Like, the food is on the table, I'm sitting down, I'm ready to go. Johnny does this thing where he'll hover around the table for a minute. I think he's like going to sit down, but then he runs back into the kitchen or to the office to like do something. And then he comes back and I'm just sitting there and I'm like, what the heck? It's annoying, but I just deal with it because I'm an adult and I can wait a little bit longer to eat, right? It's annoying, but you just deal with it. And also with some habits, you can be more mindful. Like, Johnny doesn't like when I leave dishes in the sink. He is more of a, dishes go directly in the dishwasher kind of person. And I'm more of a, like, I'll leave them in the sink for a couple hours and then put them in later. And because I know that he is the kind of person that wants them in the dishwasher, I can take the extra time to just load them in the dishwasher right away, even if that's not what I would normally do. So there's just some examples of how you navigate differences in habits. One, explaining so that you can have more compassion. Two, just dealing with it. And three, being a little bit more mindful for each other. I think a mix of all the above keeps things in harmony in a home together. Another question similar, how do you avoid getting on each other's nerves in a small space? One, I think it's important to know your breaking point and when you're coming close to it. Being able to regulate your emotions and being in tune with your own emotions is key to any relationship, whether you live together or not. Your job is to know when your patience is running thin and to do something about it yourself. Take a walk, spend time outside, or, hang out with a friend, go work out, go do something for yourself. You need to keep that in check. And of course, they need to do that too. It's a two-way street. I think that's step one. Step two, of course, is talking about it. You're going to end up having conversations about each other's quirks or whatever that get on your nerves. And that's okay. I think bringing it up and talking through it can also help make things a little easier. And my third tip is to use humor. The more you can make light of the surface level things that bug you and lovingly poke fun or laugh at each other, the better. Sorry, not laugh at each other, laugh together. Here's an example. I leave my socks everywhere, okay? It's actually rare that I'm sitting in this chair right now. My socks are still on for the record, but usually if I'm sitting somewhere, those socks are coming off, they're going on the floor, under the dining room, by the couch, anywhere. It's not great, I know. And Johnny obviously doesn't love this, but he's turned this into a game where he collects my socks throughout the week and tallies up a high score when he does his laundry. And I think he's gotten up to like 13 of my socks. But the funny thing about this is because he started doing this, I don't want him to win. So I'm actually more motivated to not leave my socks everywhere and keep his score low. So I think like last week, he only had 5 socks. It's an improvement. So anyway, the more you can make fun and make light of these things, the more joy you'll have in your relationship. And I think it also just is rooted in compassion and being like, I see that you're human, you're not perfect, and I'm okay with that. We can laugh at it. Okay, moving on. What are things that you can't know from spending a lot of time at each other's places? So the sock thing is a good example. I obviously wasn't doing that when I went to his place, like or when I'm a guest anywhere, I'm not doing that. So that's just one example, but I think you also can't know how you manage money together on a day-to-day basis before living with each other. Like it doesn't make sense to have a joint credit card or account before living with someone, so you're not getting that experience. That's something you can't really know. Also, how you will actually manage domestic labor, right? It's one thing to stay at your place or their place together for a week or two, but like in that time, you're not necessarily dealing with running out of paper towels or like having to deal with something else around the house that is just more of a long-term issue. Like who's really cooking and cleaning and managing the groceries? Who is going to reach out to the landlord if there's an issue? And how do they really take care of themselves? Like that is something you're not really going to find out until you live with them. Okay, next question. How to get over the fear? I'm not used to sharing a space and I like my alone time. When it comes to fear, I always say the same thing. Don't try to get over the fear. Make peace with it. The fear can be there and you can do it anyway because you want the thing, which is living with a partner in this case, more than you want to listen to your fear and keep staying stuck in whatever you're doing. Sharing a space with someone you love can be so cozy and safe and amazing. Really, it can be. Like I'm experiencing this now and it's truly incredible. But I also want to reiterate, having alone time is normal and you can have alone time when you live together. And I wish more people realize this. You can talk about how much alone time you want. You can do things alone. You don't have to invite your partner to everything. Like I went on a hike last weekend by myself. It was amazing. And Johnny said he was so grateful. He was appreciative that I did something for myself. You also have to remember that your partner wants alone time too, and that it's healthy for a relationship and that you don't always have to be on. Like one thing that I don't think is talked about enough when it comes to being in a secure relationship is that you're not always interacting. One, like sometimes you're just sharing a space together, sharing silence, sharing the moment, and you're not having to entertain and engage each other all the time. And I have learned in my relationship that I can be myself around Johnny the way I can be myself when I'm alone. That's the best thing I can ask for. Like the comfort and peace that I experience alone, I can experience that same level of comfort and peace with my husband. And I think that when you are experiencing that, it's not that you don't need alone time, you still do, but it's like you don't have to retreat and recharge because you're not always on, if that makes sense. Okay, next question. How to make household decisions when you don't agree. I have a really quick answer for this. And I think the easiest thing to do is whoever cares more is the person who gets their way. That's how we do it. And it honestly makes things very simple. The other approach, of course, is trying to talk about things logically, what makes sense, realistically, rationally, and how to move forward from there. Also, most decisions can be undone. Like if you decide that you want to change up your routine or you want to do chores differently or you want your partner to take over meal planning or something, you can go back, you can undo it, you can try something else. So just know that a lot of decisions you make together can be changed if needed. How do you agree on your home's aesthetic, look, and feel? So I've only lived with two heterosexual men, and both times they did not care what furniture and decor was happening as long as it was functional, high quality, and not outrageously expensive. So what I've done is like I present Johnny with a few options of furniture or decor that I like, and he chooses one. And since they're all things that I know I like, whatever he chooses is going to be great. So he still feels involved in the decision, but since I care more, I'm doing more of the work to find whatever it is we need, whether it's like a lamp or a rug for a dining room, whatever it is. And I think like you might be thinking like what if I want them to do research? You can ask them, but I think that generally the person who cares more and is more invested is probably going to be the person who does more of the work. And I know that sounds kind of unfair because you're sharing it together, but I think that's the better way to go than forcing or you're dragging your partner into doing like research on furniture and decor that they don't want to do. When it comes to furnishing a home, choosing what you're eating, just focus on what you have more in common instead of what you don't. Because if you only focus on your differences, you're going to run into a lot of conflict. Okay, moving on. How do you avoid transitioning from romantic partners to household managers? I think this shift is somewhat inevitable and it takes a ton of work to keep the romance alive. I have a whole episode on this with my friend Tara LaFerrera, who has been married for like ever. And she came on to talk about how she keeps the romance alive with her husband when they live together and work at home together. So I'll link that below. But instead of thinking, how can we avoid transitioning from romantic partners to household managers? I want you to think, how can we keep our romance alive while we transition into managing the house together as partners? And that involves date nights, daily appreciation, small moments of affection daily. Even when you don't feel like it and you're stressed and or you're a little bit upset at them, anything like that. Because that is what it means to love someone, to choose to show them love every day, even if you're not at your best. So I think that's really what it takes to keep the romance alive is making a point to give affection, even if you're not 100% in the mood to give them a kiss or a hug or tell them you love them. It also involves, of course, having stuff to look forward to, on the calendar, dates, getaways, trips, events, activities. Have stuff that you're doing together to reconnect outside of the home. I really think that when you live together, romance is more about consistency and of affection than big grand gestures. So just keep that in mind. How do you handle an income disparity? So Johnny and I are going through this right now. We've been 50-50 for most of our relationship, and my income changed in January, and I'm earning less now. So we had to sit down, and it took us 2 to 3 hours, even as people who talk about money often, to figure out what percentage split was doable and equitable for us. And what we landed on is pretty obvious, but it took us time to talk through it and get there, especially, our finances are not fully combined, and my income and expenses vary each month and his don't. There are a lot of moving parts there. When you move in together and your finances aren't combined, which I think is the norm, especially if you're living together before marriage, you have to look at your incomes, you have to look at your individual spending, the cost of living, how much you're each saving and investing, and your debt. Really, everything. You've got to look at everything together and figure out what is doable and fair. And look, if someone makes a lot more than the other person and you're splitting rent, it might mean that like you are living in a more affordable place so that the person earning less isn't like paying so much more. Like your quality of life is affected by who you're moving in with, like, and what they're able to do. Like if I was earning a lot less than Johnny, we might not be able to be in a 3-bedroom house in the Bay Area. We would be probably in a completely different situation, but we're able to make this work for now. I know that whatever you land on, you can change, right? So Johnny and I, we have this agreement right now. We're going to look at it again in 6 months and see if it still makes sense. All right, last question. Should you know the timeline of next moves like engagement and marriage before moving in? Like I said up top, yes, you should absolutely have an idea of when you want to take whatever steps you're going to take in the future of your relationship before moving in, okay? Talk about it before. If you've never said to your partner, I want to get married within the next 2 years, and you're talking about moving in together, pump the brakes. Pump the brakes hard. They have to know exactly what you expect before you sign a lease or anything. I'm hammering this home because it's so much easier to make decisions before you're tied by a lease and joint living expenses. Like if you are on a lease together and under the same roof, having a breakup over timelines is so much harder. You need to get it figured out before you live together. Save yourself the headache and the heartache and just talk about it before moving in. Just to wrap this up, moving in together won't solve core foundational relationship problems. It won't make communication easier. It does make it easier to spend time together, but existing in the same space together isn't always quality time. It can bring you closer if you're not terrified of intimacy and prone to pushing people away. And it can take your relationship to the next level if you're willing to sacrifice a little romance and step into being life partners. If you have any other questions on this, please drop them in the comments. I could talk about this forever, and I'm happy to keep the conversation going. Okay, here's our dilemma. Several months after a really hard breakup, I, 30 female, finally started to feel like myself again and get my spark back. I was even feeling hopeful and excited about the idea of starting to date again. And then I got laid off from my job. I'm a hardworking and resilient person, so I will get another job eventually, but my worry is, will anyone want to date me now? I feel like most people would want to date someone who is in a stable situation, and I personally always look for someone with a stable career. So I don't know if it's right to start dating again, especially since I'll probably have to be more restrictive with my budget and possibly limit what I can do and contribute on dates. My question is, should I wait to start dating again? And do you think it's unfair to start dating when you are in between jobs and not in a stable situation? I'm so sorry you just got laid off. Thank you for submitting this. And I just want to say, like, the job market is insanely tough right now. And either people you're dating realize that or they've been living under a rock. So just know, like, you're not alone in this. And it's just really tough. So I'm just sending you hugs. And to answer your question, like, your feelings around getting laid off and dating while unemployed are fully yours. You said you're a resilient and ambitious, hardworking person. I can understand why you have insecurity about this because this doesn't align with the vision you have of yourself. But the people you're dating might empathize. They might have been through this themselves. And I found that most of the time, as long as you have a plan and you're actively working to get another job or pursue a different track by going back to school or doing something with your career, you're fine. Whether you have a job or not, people just want to know that you have a plan for your life and that you have something going for you professionally. And even if you're unemployed, that can be true. By the way, when I met my ex, he was unemployed and it was fantastic. He had so much time to see me and his schedule was super flexible. And he did have a job lined up in the future. It just wasn't starting yet. So he was waiting for it to start, but it was great. And, it also showed me that he had a long-term plan to execute and he did that. So even though he didn't have a ton of money, it was still really fun. And by the way, I have a whole post full of budget date ideas that I will link in the show notes. But off the top of my head, here are some ideas for $30 or less. Obviously, hiking and walking. Botanical gardens are often free. Go to a local open mic. I just went to a free open mic comedy night and it was so fun. I found it on my town's subreddit. So that's a great place to find free events or cheap events. You can go to a coffee shop and sample pastries. Go to the park and do a question card game, volunteer together. You can check out different food trucks, go to a museum, which, by the way, they sometimes have free days. You can just look those up on their calendar. There are just so many different things that you can do that don't cost a lot of money that are fun. And once you get to know someone, there's also like cooking at home, board games, do a YouTube yoga session, movie nights. Like there are all kinds of things you can do at home that are low cost too. Honestly, trying to figure out free or super cheap date ideas makes you get more creative anyway, and it can be really fun. Again, with the right person, someone you actually want to date, they're going to be empathetic and understanding that you're not going to go 50-50 on an omakase dinner while you're unemployed. Like, that's okay. They can meet you where you're at. And I really want you to try to catch yourself when you feel like everyone is judging you for this, when really you're just judging yourself. A lot of people are very understanding. All right, that's all I have for you today. I want to thank you so much for listening. Thanks for trusting me. Don't forget, you're doing great.